Welcome to SoulWhat, a Soultopia production. Every Tuesday, Michelle and Roger Welch take a deep dive into the intriguing and proactive world of metaphysics, a world beyond our human perception. They'll talk to empaths, readers, and other guests from all walks of life to find out what's hiding under the surface, uncover the mysteries of our modern world, and reveal the answers you need to live a happy, healthier life. Now, here's your hosts, Michelle and Roger Welch.
Well, hello. How's everyone doing?
Good. What's up?
Well, we're recovering. I don't know if that's a good. We are recuperating from my birthday. We had
know
such
because
a wonderful time.
we discussed that last week, didn't we, Matt? We still got another 30 days left celebrating her birthday.
My birthday month.
You can't
Yes.
be done now.
He informed me over the weekend. I think we tapped out on the money, and he goes, "You're not having a birthday month." This was the birthday weekend, but no, we had a great time. We saw our friend Carla, that many of you met at Tide here in Dallas. She is in Houston, doing some. Well, is she on tonight? She is from Oklahoma, but she's in Houston taking care of some things there. So we decided to go to Houston and visit with her there. And funniest story, you guys, I've got to tell it before we bring on our extra special guest. And I don't want to take up too much time, but it's so funny. I texted Roger, and so we had a cabana, right? And I guess Roger was the designated cabana boy because I texted him, I go, "Hey, I'm sleeping, so would you not wake me up?" Because the heat just wipes me out. I had a heat stroke when I was little, and so heat just wipes me out. I'm a big baby. And so, but it was really nice. And so he took that as don't come up to the room at all. So he was like in this cabana all day. And I was like,
I was drinking.
Then I texted him.
Sounds all right.
I texted him and I said, "Roger, did you put like sunscreen on your neck? Did you put sunscreen on, because I didn't want that neck, all that." And anyway, he comes up and he's like, "Well, you were sleeping, but that was so nice of you. Let me sleep." And
I was on the pool. The cabana was kind of it was shady back into the back of it. I had a lounge chair with an umbrella. I had a waitress bring me food and drinks all day.
a lot of fruit.
What else? I had like a huge, fruit bowl.
basket.
Yeah, I think you were all set.
So what else you want?
Yeah, what do you need?
We had water.
Water, varieties of everything.
And so anyway, we are so excited for our guest today. We were at INATS, and most of you who've listened for a while know that Roger and I have gone to INATS now for, I don't know, 12 years?
Yeah, about 12, 13 years. Yeah.
And so to buy for our stores. And now, that I've written some books, that it changes a little bit of our focus. But we were and we've won some awards. Roger primarily has won awards in the past for his potions, his incense, we've won for our jewelry. Mm-hmm. But my book was up this time, and I won for my category. I won, and I was happy just to make it because there were like 7 books that I was like, "Oh, these are great books," and I had them in my store. Yep. And so I won a bronze award for my first book, The Magic of Connection. And then this wonderful spirit just was she's with Llewellyn too, and she was at the other table, and she won a gold award for her book, and she's on Paganism for Prisoners, Connecting to the Magic Within. And Awyn Dawn is her name. She's our guest tonight. And you guys, I about knocked her down when I ran up and I said, and we have lots of guests on, right, Matt? We have lots of authors, and
We do.
We do. And I beeline, did I not?
You did.
I beeline for her, and I was like, "Will you be on my show?" And so, Awyn, thank you for being here. I'm going to read your bio first, and then we'll chit-chat, okay?
Okay, that sounds great.
Great. So, yeah, I'm so excited, you guys, and I think you're going to find how excited you are, too, that we have Awyn on the show. So, in 2012, Awyn Dawn found herself incarcerated after over a decade of substance abuse and addiction. She attributes the time she was incarcerated to helping her reconnect to her pagan spirituality. After her release from prison, Awyn found a local year-and-a-day class in paganism. She completed her first degree initiation, then her second degree initiation just over a year later. She taught many students during this time. In 2018, she began to take a class in witchcraft and paganism into the prisons she was once at. and quote, I always like to say that I was teaching witchcraft to the inmates, she says humorously. They absolutely loved it. When she submitted her first book idea, Paganism for Prisoners, Connecting to the Magic Within, she had no idea that it would lead to a career as an author. Paganism for Prisoners was a labor of love. I like to put the same energy into everything I write, she says. Now a high priestess, Awyn is always looking for more opportunities to help people, especially those with a troubled past, to help them live up to their potential. If one person reads Paganism for Prisoners and is inspired to change their life, then I shall consider it a triumph. Awyn Dawn has a second book, Paganism on Parole, Connecting to the Magic All Around, scheduled for release in November of 2022, and Book of Spells expected in 2024. And I can tell you guys that there's been more than one person read it. As I said, she won a gold cover award for her book. She won first place for Paganism for Prisoners. You guys welcome Awyn Dawn. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I just want to say that I'm also a July birthday, so it's my birthday month too. So no wonder we clicked.
When's your birthday, Awyn?
On the 20th.
Okay, good. I'm glad to know it. Yeah, see? All month long. We'll study.
All month long.
All month long. Well, so I did. I don't know if you realized how much I beelined for you and just was like, and we were getting our picture made or something, but I was like, I would really love to have you on the show. And we do have quite a few authors on the show, not just from Llewellyn, but from all over. And I just loved your enthusiasm. And I really didn't know your story, but I knew that I was going to already buy. We have 3 stores, and so we buy quite a few books from different publishers, but a lot from Llewellyn, right?
Right.
Since it is Llewellyn is my publisher, and I'm really excited to dig into the topic of your book. And I did read it. I read, this is the one that's sitting up here. If it's kind of open, this is the one that I just pulled from the floor, so you can tell. It's kind of pulling open here. I read it. I haven't dug in and been able to do the exercises, but what I found, Awyn, is that it is written primarily for, and it's called Paganism for Prisoners, but I found a lot of things in this book that I can use, that were useful to me also. So I don't believe it, even though you wrote it for prisoners and it could be used as a teaching tool for people in prisons, correct? I think
Yes.
other people, I just want everyone to know that it could be a book for everyone to read. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of what I had in mind when I wrote it. My key demographic was, of course, incarcerated pagans, but I didn't want it to be limited. I wanted it to be a book that had potential to help anybody and everybody who was looking for that shadow work and that self work and that digging deep into who we are.
Right. So how would it work? I guess it may be different in every single place that someone's incarcerated, but how would they go about getting the book in the first place? I mean, would they have access to your book?
It does vary a little bit depending on the prison. I know Llewellyn has been really good about donating some of the books and working with chaplains to get them into the prisons. But in some of the facilities, I don't want to say most because I can't say that accurately, but I do know in a large percentage of them, you can actually order books straight from a publisher. And Llewellyn is on the approved vendor list for a lot of facilities. So that's one way they can do it. Another way is the chaplains, the pagan clergy who go in are often able to bring in books. And finally, some prisons, although I don't recommend this for most people, will let them be bought. But if they are bought, they have to be bought usually through a reputable vendor that's already been cleared. So that's how people are going to get copies of my book inside.
Right. So I know that you volunteer. Could you tell us a little bit about, and we may have to backtrack on your story, but what I really like so much is how much you give back. That part of your story is huge to me, that you give back to and you are very involved in going into the prisons, it sounds like from your book, and giving back and teaching and holding classes. And could you tell us a little bit about that in Colorado, right?
Yeah, in Colorado. So it has been on hold a little bit because of COVID, and things kind of shut down. But for 2 years prior to COVID, I went in 3, 4, 5 times a month, mostly to the two women's facilities in Colorado. And like I was really fortunate because Colorado tends to be more open towards people having access to their faith than a lot of other states are. So I was able to go in, and I remember from the very first class, like these women, it was primarily women I worked with. These women would just look at me like they were being fed for the first time, even little things that I took for granted, like, we're all part of the divine. Like nobody ever told them that before. And to really, it was like light bulbs going off in their brain all the time. And it's just this incredible experience. And so one of my short-ish long-term goals is to create kind of a chaplain training program that people could do. So if they want to go into the prisons and they're like, I have no idea what to do, it would be a stepping stone for them. And so that's a project that I plan to work on. And I actually have a friend who I was incarcerated with, who is also pagan, who's very excited about helping me with that project. So yeah, but going in and having them for a moment not be inmates, because when you're in prison, you're inmate 1517298. That's who you are. You lose your identity. And so when they were in that class, which was actually open to any faith as long as they were respectful, they really got to come in and be free in a place that doesn't encourage freedom or individuality.
Yeah.
Did you have people that came to you, like you said, any faith was actually accepted? What about that when somebody came to you and they're like, well, we don't understand this because I'm Christian and tell me about it. And how did that go?
I think everybody who came to my classes was genuinely curious.
Mhm.
Like I did have a couple people who identified it as Christian, but like they came in and they were open and they were willing to listen. And like I really didn't have to have that difficult discussion because when they came in, they were seekers. That's all you had to be. Like as long as you're respectful in the group, you're welcome to stay. If you're not, I'm going to ask you to leave. I never found that problem with the incarcerated population. I did get it with some of the staff. Was
Interesting.
not as open-minded, but everybody who came to my classes, and sometimes there were 30 women in the class. Like one year we had Yule, and they did the Battle of the Oak King and the Holly King, and it's the most amazing interpretation I will probably ever see in my life. And some of them were Buddhist, some of them were agnostic, some of them were atheist, but it didn't matter in that moment because we were all there for the same purpose. And so that was really common in my classes.
Do you think it was probably where people of different faiths sees this faith, accepts this faith for their fellow person, and just kind of more accepting with it?
Well, I think it helps that I was locked up with a lot of them.
Okay.
Like they knew me as my inmate number,
Yeah.
and they saw me grow, and I think that created a bit of intrigue with them as well. I'm not saying that they came for me, right? Like I would hope not. I would hope that they would come for something bigger than that. But they definitely showed up wanting something, and I think a lot of them had never really heard of paganism. And so there was that touch of curiosity, like, what is that? And the first couple classes, maybe because things spread like wildfire in prison. If you have like a good experience, everybody who's in that prison will know. And so I think word of mouth spread. And like, so some women would come every week and like take notes and ask questions, and other women would show up a time or two and then they would leave, but they always left with peace and hopefully they learned something.
I like how you talked, and just the first chapter is called The Power of Words and the Power of Silence. And I like how you addressed that. And I'm not sure where, if it was at that in the introduction or there, or continuation in the first chapter of the fact that in prison you do have time to reflect, and you do learn, that you talked about that whole thing. Are you just waiting for someone to finish what they're saying so that you can say what you have to say? Or are you actually listening to what, the other person is saying? Are you actively listening? I'm summarizing, but you did talk about that in the first chapter, I think, and a little bit in the introduction, correct? And how you have time in prison to do that and to really reflect and to think and the power of silence. So could you talk, because I would have thought that it would be, I guess you'd have a lot of time on your hands. Time is, you have a lot of time, and you said that too, but I would think, did you have silence? Where's there silence? Because you always get and just to let people know, I did criminal law for quite some time. I don't know if you know that, Awyn. I worked for first the Court of Appeals, then I worked for the DA's office in Dallas, and then I did criminal defense work for a while, but I was primarily consultant to preserve your error for appeal, and I did appellate work. So I wasn't ever in court as a criminal defense attorney per se, except for if they had already been convicted, if someone had already been convicted. So I was, just to let people know, I do have a little insight into going in and visiting women and men in jail or in prison. So there wasn't a lot of quiet from what I noticed. So how did you find that? You had the time, but how did you find that silence?
Well, so the silence actually, it started in prison, but it continued for a long time afterwards. So, as my bio says, like, I spent a lot of time addicted to drugs. And so, like, I had to have the TV on and a book going and the radio going and as much noise as possible because I couldn't sit with who I was. And so, even though prisons can be loud, I think the real noise people need to be aware of is the internal noise. That internal, like, I'm not good enough, I'm always going to be an inmate, this is the end of my life, I'm never this and that and the other thing, and it gets really loud really quickly. And so and silence was so hard for me. That's why I made it my first chapter, is because it was something I really, really, really had to work on. And I worked on it after I got out of prison as well. So it kind of started off when I was inside, just like, I felt like I was screaming in my head every time I was on lockdown and the prison was quiet, and you can hear like your bunkie coughing over here and somebody writing over here, and really focusing on those sounds. And I noticed that by focusing on those, it helped the screaming that I had in my own head, this lack of love and empathy I had towards myself. It silenced it a bit. And like when I got out, I still had to have that noise, because I wasn't there yet. I wasn't to the place where I could work on myself. But I definitely started noticing when I was in prison and using those periods of silence. Like, I would sit on my bunk during lockdown and copy pages out of pagan books that we had in the library, because it felt like something that was good for me, and I didn't know why, and I didn't understand it, but it kept me from screaming inside myself. And so that's what I did. And now I'm to a point, like, I don't even turn the TV on in the morning. Like, I'm just like, oh, it's so quiet. And I really appreciate the silence, but it took several years of hard work to get there. And so that's why I start them there, like, because they're going to have to keep working on that for a long time.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And so did you have, like, just that, though, with that, the mind totally going, was it the racing thoughts too, just racing totally, and that's part of that slowing down that mind chatter and to get to that silence? Yeah, I understand that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what drew you, and forgive me if you answered this already, but what drew you to, was there a book? Was there something that drew you to paganism? Or had you already been drawn to paganism before you were incarcerated?
So I like to look at it like this. I've always been pagan, but I didn't always know I was pagan. I remember being in kindergarten and, asking those questions to myself, like if we're created in the image. Oh, I went to a Christian kindergarten. So like
Yeah.
if we were created in the image of God, then why don't men have babies? Like that would make sense because, it's supposed to be the life giver. And, what happened to the Greek gods and the Egyptian ones? Where did they go? Do people I didn't even know that it was an option to worship other gods. I have a Southern Baptist upbringing, so it's not exactly, something that they're like, oh, you have all these other options that you get this one. And so when I was in my late teens, I came across a book. It's a very old book, but a very good beginner book, to ride a silver broomstick. And it just ended up in my hands somehow. And I'm going to paraphrase because I haven't read that book in several years, but in there, Silver is talking about, honoring the old gods and this connectedness to nature. And I was like, this is what I am.
Yeah.
And ever since then, I'm like, that's what I am. And it's changed. And what it means to be pagan, to be a witch, to be Wiccan or heathen, these things have changed for me over time.
Right.
But that was my epitome moment when I was like, I'm not alone. I'm not alone.
Right. And it wasn't Southern Baptist, but I had a very similar upbringing. So I understand that, that this is how it is. This is the box you're in. And then when I had that, but always kind of wondering. So in my book, Spirits Unveiled, and I want to tell you something. I was telling Roger when I was writing up here, I said, going through your book, there are a lot of parallels between the book that I just came out with, Spirits Unveiled, and your book, because you talk about connecting with loved one, connecting with, now, and you do explain the difference between a familiar and a spirit animal or whatever we want to call it. I know there's proper ways people want to call that right now. Llewellyn corrects me all the time right now, but it changes. But and I'm going to have you answer that question about familiars in just a second, because I see the arguments a lot of times in groups. They'll argue about, but my cat's my familiar, and then they all get into and then I just get off of it, because when they start arguing, I get off usually. I'm not going to be the expert on that, but there's a lot of familiarity of how you connect, how you pay honor between our books, even though they're completely different types of books, right? But there's a lot of overlap because it's energy. And so I really, that's when it didn't surprise me that I almost knocked you down and said, come on our show. But one of the things I want to make sure that we address before we get into some of the details of the chapters is, how do you think, you talk about, well, at least I always heard about people being incarcerated. It's, there's one of the things is punitive, but there's also, you want to cut down, you want to help people so they don't go back to prison, and you want to, and I didn't see a lot of that when I'm going to be honest. I did not see a lot of help for people in the system, okay, for whatever we want to officially call it. If anything, I saw that it was not helpful, and it was set up to have people go back and not help people at all. And so how do you think your book and those who could maybe help, spread your book and spread the word of your book could help with the recidivism rate? Thank you. How do you think that could help? Because I think it could.
Oh man, that's such a big question, and it's one of my favorite topics, because I'm a minority as far as people who have been incarcerated, because I didn't go back. That's really messed up, that the minority is people who don't go back. And absolutely the system is set up to fail. I think, and I talk about this even more in my second book that's coming out, but addressing mental health, I think, is one of the biggest, because even though every person who's been to prison isn't a drug addict, there is a high correlation. And people don't just wake up and be like, I want to become addicted to crack today. There's stuff that happens in their life and they haven't been given the skills to cope with it. And so I'm a firm believer that even in childhood, we should be normalizing going to mental health. Like, I'm not going to a therapist because I'm, crazy or there's something wrong with me. Like, everybody should go to a therapist.
Right.
Everybody should get mental health, and it should start young. Actually, I have a background in mental health. And like, children need permission from a parent to get mental health treatment. And to a certain extent, I understand this, but you have to consider that if a child is in an environment where they're getting abused or bullied or neglected or starved, is that parent really going to be like, of course you can go to therapy?
Right.
The people the children who need it most get denied access by definition. And and then the next thing is talking about spirituality. And I don't mean like, okay, go and read from this book and do it verbatim. I mean questioning.
Right.
Like, if somebody picks up my book or any book and they're like, you know what, this doesn't make sense to me, I'm going to question that. That should be happening. That should absolutely be happening. So I think mental health, spirituality, breaking the stigma of incarceration, because when you're out of prison, like fresh out of prison, most landlords won't rent to you. It's really hard to get a job. People think everybody who was in prison was a murderer or a rapist or something like that. And you know what? There's a lot of people who were in prison because they didn't think they had another choice. Or, they've got these long ties. And cutting cords is something I address in my second book, because it's important to know that just because you've known Bobby Sue since you were, 2 years old, doesn't mean you have to keep hanging out with that person if they're going to keep encouraging you to do stuff that's going to land you back in prison or in jail or on probation or addicted to drugs or doing any number of stupid things.
Right.
And so like, it's my hope that in my book, like, a lot of these things are addressed and people start asking the number one most important question: why? Why do I believe this? Why am I doing this? Why is this my thought process? Why is this my spirituality?
Right.
Like,
and
do I even believe this? Yeah.
I love how you have that in your exercises. So your exercises will say, you have them say why. Those questions that you just have, you have that in the exercise, little bullet points at the end of some of the chapters. You'll say, why am I doing why do I believe this? What do I believe? And you just very, 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 and I think all of us should sit down. I mean, I was reading through one and I was like, like I said, I skimmed. I didn't take time to do all the exercises, but I thought, we need to answer these questions. Everyone should answer. And back to the mental health issue, it's chicken or egg. I mean, what, are they self-medicating? A lot of people are self-medicating and then they get addicted to drugs, and then we just label them, and then they're in the system. And we also have had on Brittany Knock at Midnight. I cannot remember her last name. I never can remember her last name, but she wrote a book about it's a different. It's been a very popular show. You might want to look back at it, Awyn, and it's. Her mother was. It's back to when, even if you were a co-conspirator and you were just the one who made the one little phone call, you would be in prison for life, right? I mean, you were just literally, somebody gave you $1 or whatever to go make $10 to make a phone call, and you were the one who got in prison for life. And so she is working for those people who were incarcerated for life, and a lot of it did have to do with poverty and the circumstances that they were in, that they couldn't get out of prison. And I know that for a fact because I represented a lot of those people on appeal, and they weren't given a fair shake. So we could get off on that forever because the system the system is broken. I mean, let's be honest, it is broken, or at least I think it is. So what was it for you when you got? What was it, the paganism that helped you be different, or paganism? Why are you the minority? What happened with you when you got out of prison? What was it like? And to really, rebuild your life?
I'm not that special. I think the only difference is that I was tired enough to try something different.
Mm.
And it wasn't like I got out of prison and like everything was just hunky dory. Like, I relapsed and had to tell my PO, and that was a very humbling and terrifying experience,
Mm.
because I had only been out 24 hours, and it was the first thing I did was go and get high. And so it was a culmination of things, but I was tired, so tired. It is exhausting being in and out of jails and prisons and running from the law and getting drugs and, getting high and hiding it and telling lies and keeping track of the lie. It's so tiring. And paganism definitely, like, it encourages people to be who they are. It doesn't say you have to be 5'6", you have to be of a certain race or
Right.
ethnic group, you have to have a certain number of tattoos, like none of that.
Right.
Like, and really there's a good level of trial and error. So like what my practice looked like when I got out of prison and what it looks like now are totally different, and that's okay.
Right.
Um, I think this ability to be okay with being wrong was a really
Mm.
big one. And I don't like to be wrong. I am always right.
Who does really?
But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but that ability to be like, you know what? This isn't working. I'm going to try something else, but I'm going to keep this part. But like, I just kept trying until I found something that worked. And
Mm.
like the whole inspiration for my book is the fact that I'm not that special. If
Mm.
I can do it, other people can do it too. And I just want to help them figure out how.
Yeah. So in the next book, you'll address, you right out of jail, you told your PO, you were honest, when you went to and said what happened. So I'm sure, I'm not sure, but I'm assuming in your next book, you talk about that too. I mean, I a lot of the cases I did on appeal were, deferred to you. There were cases where people were, parole revocation or and things like that, a probation revocation, excuse me, and it was really a setup for failure. A lot of times, they were just set up. I would a lot of times even I would be like, why didn't they just go do the 2 years? Because it was a setup. If you know what I'm talking about, it was
Absolutely.
It was so difficult for them to. It was going to be so difficult to make it through, and then they were going to get maxed or whatever if they didn't make it through that. So I'm glad you're following up with that second book and how to spiritually navigate that, for lack of a better word, with your paganism and those on parole yeah. So
Well, and I have notes in there to the parole officers too, because it's not just a one-way street.
yeah.
So the main focus is people who are on parole, but I'm like, if you're a parole officer and somebody comes to you and they've got, 6 months left and they request an athame and they're genuine in their faith and they've been doing everything right, like don't give it an automatic no just because it's technically a knife. Like,
Yeah.
give these things consideration. And I think I talk in there about having the goddess of justice in your office. And so there's all these things for parole officers too, because it's not, sometimes when you're on parole, it feels like you're doing everything you possibly can and you can't catch a break.
Yeah, it does seem that way. Yeah, it seemed that way when I was, and even with people that I'd meet, I would go through and I'd be like, why can't they just give them a break? Some of them, sometimes I'd be like, oh, this is, but I'd read a lot of transcripts and there's not a lot in transcripts with parole situations. So, you didn't have a lot to go on, what was said. There wasn't a whole lot documented that you get a hold of as the attorney, but you could just get a feel of it. Plus, they forget I'm psychic. So I could feel it. And so I would feel it and I'd be like, they're not even wanting to help, and then some really did want to help and wanted to see people succeed. So anyway, that's a little bit off the track, but not really, so.
No, not really.
Not really. But it was, and I was doing that a long time ago. It was a lifetime ago. I was very young, and I was very disillusioned with the unfairness of the system. even back then. I don't know if it's gotten better or worse, to be honest with you. But I know that we saw how many positive comments and
Oh, yeah. Tons.
how everyone was so positive about your book. How does that feel?
For an author, I'm speechless. Like when you read in my bio, my intention when I wrote this book was like to reach one person. And like, I was like, oh my gosh, Llewellyn picked it up. Holy cow. And like, I never expected to win an award. I never expected strangers to be like, oh my gosh, so and so is in prison right now and I'm sending them your book and I hope it helps. And, I have this story about when I was incarcerated 20 years ago and I wish I'd had a book like this. And I'm not a big crier, but it makes me like tear up because
Well, it
it's
should.
beautiful.
Yeah.
It's really inspiring. And like, I just hope that my book does those people justice. That's all I want is for it to help.
Yeah.
When you were writing the book, because we met you at INATS and you presented there, you also won the cover awards like we did. But when you were writing the book, what did you want out of the book? I mean, what was your ultimate goal there?
I wanted every inmate in America to have a copy, is what I wanted. At least everyone who wanted one. I wanted it to be accessible because, like, I think even if you give people in prison and people on parole a glimmer of hope, just a little glimmer, that maybe they don't have to keep living their life in jail cells and missing Christmases and family dinners and growing up with their kids not knowing them. If you give them that glimmer, some will run with it. Some want a way out. Some want hope. Some want to believe that something beyond what they've always been told is possible is possible. And that's what I want.
And that's empowerment. So what you're wanting to do is to give them that hope and give them that empowerment. And you're all about empowerment, I think. And you're about empowering people to believe that there's something more. There's that hope. And you do that from the beginning of the book, throughout the book. And again, I'll be reading it again, and I'll be doing the exercises because I need them. But you talk about empowering and the power of words, even just in the first chapter. I love how you start with that. You talked with the silence, but you also talked about how we speak to ourselves, even. Those power of the words. Roger's always reminding me, but when we say love, and this is you guys on page 11, just like right at the beginning of the book, and I'm a highlighter. I swapped out the books. So this is one we have a stack for sale in our store, just so everybody knows. Come in and get them at Soultopia or wherever, Llewellyn, at Barnes & Noble, online, at Amazon, and wherever you want to get them. But we have them. But I'll show you guys. Y'all all know I'm a highlighter, and it has to be yellow. And I'm like, no blue highlighters, like no wire hangers. But I know I'm snobby about my highlighters, but it's love, and saying I love you, I'm quoting, is one of the most powerful statements you can make. It's a wonderful, I'm skipping down, it's a wonderful thing to let family and friends know that you love them as often as possible, and to know the different kinds of love. You talk about this, and to know when to use the word love and to mean it, and when not to. And the word hate and how strong that is. It's you write, hate is extreme loathing. Like if you said, I hate such and such food or a color or a movie, you really need to know what this means. You say the phrase, I promise, and I'm sorry. And I highlighted under I'm sorry because I used to be one of those kids that, because I was an empath and I just could pick up on everybody. I thought it was, I needed to make everybody happy. I'd be like, I'm sorry. It started to be a lie when I was saying I was sorry, because I was saying I was sorry for things that I didn't do, right? I was apologizing and I didn't even do something. I was just like taking on things that I didn't even need to say I was sorry for. So really, I need to be responsible for those words too, so it doesn't weaken my I'm sorry. And you wrote, just be mindful that when you overuse I'm sorry, You are telling yourself and the universe that you are a sorry person. It becomes a self-fulfilling, I'm assuming this word is prophecy, if you're not using it with care. Use I apologize instead. And it is possible that you have told loved ones, I'm sorry, so many times now that the words have become meaningless. And so even if you have done something that you need to apologize for, use the words, I apologize. I love that, you guys. So those of us who use that a lot, that meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
Because it rang true for me, right? Mm-hmm. And that the power of the words, the energy behind those words are when it just meant a lot. And so these are things that all of us can use. Talk to us a little bit. Roger, do you want to jump in? Because I can just go.
I know.
Well, and this is where Roger did have some questions, because I will say with that Baptist upbringing, there's a big, the churches that I went to, they did have prison ministries. So do you have, and I said to Roger, this might be something that you might be interested in doing, or I might be interested in doing. How would somebody, in different states, like, I guess they would just call the prisons, how would they get involved to see if there's a prison ministry in the prisons, as opposed to it being through a certain church? Do you know how that works, or is it different from state to state or county to county?
I wish I had a really good and insightful answer for that. About the best I can tell you is there's usually a volunteer coordinator who works at prisons. They might have a different title, but there's usually somebody who is in charge of the volunteer programs that come in, whether that be yoga, church groups, chaplaincy, finger painting, whatever volunteers bring into the facility. They're the one who reaches out to all those people. So they would be the person to start with. And this is just an educated guess, but if it's not listed as like, here are our employees at XYZ prison, you could, send an email like, hey, I'm interested in finding out more about volunteer programs, or I'm interested in volunteering. Can you put me in touch with your volunteer coordinator? Mm-hmm. And that would be the simplest way. Some prisons can have a lot more red tape, but like usually if you're willing to volunteer, they're like, oh, volunteers, yay, and they'll put you in touch with somebody.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be through like a prison ministry that's already set up, that's a certain large, certain denomination, religion that's already there. They might consider bringing in, because you go through the chaplain, and hopefully they would allow different diversity in religion, right? I would hope.
Hopefully, yeah, we would hope so. But so when you have programs like yoga, right, you can just be like, I want to teach yoga, and they're like, okay, fill out these forms. You usually have to sit through some classes, don't mail letters for inmates, don't give them money, don't get in relationships, like the class is very boring but important. And so they'll have some sort of training program that you sit through, and they'll get you a badge that you take in, and you schedule with the volunteer coordinator. Okay, I want to come in on the second Tuesday of every month, or something like that. And that's generally how it works. And so it works kind of that way with chaplaincy too. Like, depending on the volunteer coordinator, you might not even need to talk to the chaplain of the facility.
Oh, I see. Okay. Because the book is written, even though all of us could benefit from this book, the book is written as a teacher's guide of sorts, right? So someone could take the book in and could literally walk people through and use your book as the lesson plan.
Well, I actually found out recently that there is. They're out of Minnesota, and they're a chaplaincy training program, and they've actually added my book as part of their curriculum. So, and that's really humbling. So yeah, like essentially, if you don't know a lot about paganism, you're not a high priestess, you haven't been studying for 40 years, but you have a basic foundation, and you're like, I just don't know what to teach. Like, Paganism for Prisoners gives you 13 lessons for a reason. 13 lessons. You can go in once a month, like talk about this. And and I encourage people to be flexible. Like if you're in there and they need 2 months to talk about silence or death, if they need that extra time, use that extra time. It's just a guide. It's not, I mean, it's written on paper, but it's
Yeah.
not written in stone,
Right.
and I want people to be flexible and to have some fun with it, because it's not about getting it right or wrong.
Right.
It's about helping people fill their spiritual selves.
Read the room and know where they're. Yeah.
So earlier you said that some of your challenges was not the prisoners, but the staff. Was it because of the paganism side of it, or was it because you were there and came back as somebody teaching?
I would say a little of both, but more being pagan. A lot of them, once I colored my hair and everything and didn't have the glasses on, they didn't know. Like a lot of them didn't recognize me.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, "Hey, so and so," and they'd be like, "Who are you?" So I think it was definitely more of the pagan elements, and not so much on the local staff level. Like the prison I went into, those staff were generally pretty good, with a few exceptions, but like it's the infrastructure, it's
Yeah.
the top of the pyramid that like really just pushes back. And so like, because the people who are there every day with, 500 incarcerated men or women, they want them to do something besides fight each other and try to beat each other up and like get into trouble and like all the stuff people do to fight boredom when they're in prison. They want them to do something else. So it's really it's the higher levels that have
Yeah.
always given me more difficulty.
Interesting. So it's just so like we were talking about earlier. It doesn't meet the requirement, that rehabilitation requirement. We fail on that, I think, so much in our society.
Well, you would think if it gives them something to focus on, focus their energy into, this versus this that gets them in trouble, why would you not want them focusing on something
know.
even better?
I
To keep
totally
them,
agree.
keep their
Money.
energy. Exactly, because they get paid by the
Money.
person and how many days they're there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you think about it, when somebody gets out on parole, they have to pay for UAs, they have to pay restitution, they have to pay for their meetings with their PO, they have to, pay this bill and that bill, and like, so there's a lot of money to be made, like. And then when they go back into prison, and I can say this from personal experience because I was on something called a farm crew, which is basically they load you up in a van and you go do hard manual labor in a field, right? Like we made $1 a day
Mhm.
at the height, so you figure they're probably paying out $80 a day and making several hundred off of that.
Yeah.
So it's
It's a lucrative
and there's other
business.
things too, that aren't just the farm crew, but it happens a lot. And there's been some effort to try and pay people who are incarcerated a living wage, because like tampons, for example, cost the same on the outside as they do in prison. So if you're making 38 cents a day and you work 4 days a week, that like everything's gone by the
Yeah.
time you get paid.
Yeah.
As a kid, do they still have farm crews?
Oh yeah, that's what I was on.
And the reason I say that is because I haven't seen one in forever, I guess.
I
But as a
haven't either.
kid, I used to see them all the time in like Tennessee, Mississippi. I would see them. But I was watching that show, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, the other day, and they were on the farm crew and they escape. And I was,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I was like, you know what? I have not seen a farm crew in forever.
I used to see them in Texas too.
Yeah,
and I don't
I've
see
just
them.
like
Yeah.
I have not seen one in forever though. So I was thinking about that a few weeks ago. I was like, I wonder if they still do that.
Well, I guess we know.
Yeah, now I know.
Yeah.
Well, and that was 10 years ago. Like maybe, hopefully, they don't do that anymore. Maybe it's gone away within the last few years. Like that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Did you get to choose?
No, I was voluntold. I was like, this is the position you're working.
Ugh.
Yeah. Well, as far as let's get back a little bit because I said we would talk about this. You address a lot of just things that people can use in your book. You do talk about animals, and you talk about them as totems. You explain the word totem. You're getting into a lot of detail, and for people to teach, but also for anybody who just wants to read the book. You do talk about familiars, and I'll see a lot of people posting on groups on social media, and for some reason that little topic raises a lot of ire with people. They're like, that's not a familiar. You can't call your cat a familiar. So explain to us what you believe a familiar is, and so that people can understand what a familiar is in a pagan practice.
Well, for me, it's an animal, whether real or on the ethereal plane, which is equally real, but
Right.
just to separate the two, that you do magical workings with. So maybe your cat does help you in magical casting, but maybe your cat doesn't.
Right.
Maybe your cat is just a house cat. And not everybody needs a familiar. But one of the coolest things is that familiars can be astral. They can absolutely be, this dragon that I created is my familiar and I
Right.
work with. But it's not just like, oh, I made this dragon and isn't it cool? It's something to be respected. It's a working partner.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of like, if you have a wand, and you're like using it to clean your ears and you're swatting flies, it's disrespecting the tool. So a familiar should have that same level of respect because they're your magical comrade. And I also try and stay out of the argument because I have better places to put my time. So
And
somebody's
energy,
like, this
right?
is,
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
social
this is-
media.
And energy. I have come to so much energy is put into a lot of things that at the end of the day, I don't like that phrase really at the end of the day, but literally at the end of a long day of arguing on social media, you're like, I just wasted my whole day arguing about something that's the silliest thing. I do find a lot of people they do this in all areas of life right now because I think they can, the screen protects them. They might not would do it if they were sitting right with somebody. They might not treat them the same way. They might, but they just argue about some of the silliest things instead of just having good dialogue. Healthy. Hey, what do you think about this? And then the other person's like, well, what do you think? Okay, well, yeah, let me mull that over, and you talk about that in your book. You say it. It's like a salad bar. I love that. And in your introduction, you're like, if you like olives, put them on your salad. And if you don't like olives, don't put them on your salad. I love that. And I say that in all my teaching in my books. If you want to take what I have to offer, fine. If you want to stick a pin in it and think about it, put it on your little etheric bulletin board to take down later, you can. And if you just absolutely don't agree with something, that's fine too. I have people who read my Magic of Connection book, and I talk about cord cutting, and I say you don't need to cut cords. It's a different thing. Read the book before, and they were like, oh, people are going to get really upset with you. That doesn't mean you're best friends with those people you shouldn't hang out with. It's just a different way of energetically dealing with it. So people have to read the whole book, and once they do, a lot of people use it. Have you met James Devine, the palmistry guy?
Not yet.
You'll love it. Well, I don't know the show, but pretty much everybody loves him. He's been on our show several times, and he reads hands. He at Tide, he was probably the most. He doesn't just traditionally read the palmistry. He reads. He was on about Johnny Depp's finger and the cut on the ring, and he reads your rings, and he's fascinating. He's a high priest, and I'm not sure which coven he's in, but he's in Seattle. But he's like, oh, Michelle, we use your book in our coven, the Magic of Connection book. He goes, there's 3 things in there that I completely disagree with, and I'm like, only 3? There's only 3 in the whole book? That's great. I thought there'd be every page would be flagged. That's great if there's only 3, and I've never asked him which 3 because great. But on Facebook, I think, and on some of those social media things, it's just like it gets out of control with just the arguing, and that's where I think you pick up a book like yours and it answers really simply. It's an in-depth book, but it's a book is easy to approach in the sense of the way you lay it out. I think it's laid out in a very organized way. And what I would suggest to everyone to get this book, Paganism for Prisoners, for yourself. And then when you get a book, get a book and a copy or 2 or 3, and send them to someone you know that's incarcerated, or somebody who has a family member that is, or you could just send them, find out how, maybe we will here, and send them straight to, figure out how to send them to the jails or the prisons, right? So, and there's recommended reading in the back, and there's different, you give a lot of resources in the back of the book. And so I just think it's you give some spells, some advocacy spells, and you have a lot of gratitude in your book. There is a lot about gratitude, and you have a lot of gratitude, which is why I believe another reason it's so successful, Awyn, because you have such gratitude, and you were so just lit up when you won. And I looked at Roger and I was just like, I like her. You know, I like her. She is, and we've got to have her on the show. So we do always, and that clock is always a little bit hidden there by something's in front of it. But I think we give a giveaway, Awyn, on the show. And what
I got it.
You got it. And so Roger's got a question, and
we'll
then we're
actually
gonna do our
send you.
giveaway.
We'll send you one of Awyn's books.
So you guys, just so you'll know how to pronounce, I asked her, and I think I have it right. It's Awyn, okay? So there's
Awyn.
It's not Awyn, right? Am I getting it right the whole time or not? Have I
Yeah,
been
no,
saying
you've
it?
been saying it right.
Okay.
Awyn Dawn.
So you guys don't put an R in there.
Awyn.
And then when you say Matt Orwin's name, it gets really confusing, because Psychic Witch, Matt, I mispronounced his name for a long time. So, but
I got text him.
so what's the question?
All right. So we all 3 won awards. What awards did we
This is
win?
the question to win her book?
This is the
Okay.
question to win. And I'm watching right here on Facebook Live, so it'll go through in just a minute. And while they're answering what awards
Did
did
they have
we
to
all
give
win?
the name of it?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, the name
the
of the
name
award,
of
because
the award.
we won
not just
different levels.
gold, but yeah, the name of the award.
Because my book didn't win gold.
Yeah. But yes, what
No, I'm
what name of the awards? But my question is, what's next?
Okay, so I am working on my 3rd book, a book of spells right now. I'm headed to grad school.
Ooh.
I want to get an MFA and expand my writing career. Like I love writing books on paganism and that help people. But there's another piece there. There's another element. I've got, stories that are going to bring life to situations we don't like to think about, like the connection between PTSD and incarceration, or well, I don't want to give away too much because they're not written yet, but I really want to I want to write books that that move people. So as Awyn Dawn, I have books that, people close it and they're like, wow, that was amazing. And I also want to write books where people close it and they're like, wow, I need to step away from this book for a while. Fiction in that element. So,
Yeah.
and I also mentioned that the course that I've started working on, the training course, and really the sky's the limit.
Right.
What's next is wherever the gods send me, because they have sent me all these places. They were kind of like pestering me to write this book. They're like, you got to write this book. And I'm like, oh, nobody's ever going to want to read this book. And so I wrote the book and people want to read the book. So I'll just see what they have planned for me.
I think that's great. And yeah, people do want to read the book. It's a great book. And
Thank you.
And I am so glad that I read it, just so, not because I have such a broad reach, but I think people really need to know that, yes, we want to get it in the hands of all the prisons, but there are people that are not incarcerated also can very much benefit from this book too. I think that it needs to be reiterated and reiterated. I know when people come in our store, this is one that I can definitely recommend as a great place to learn about paganism. And to help.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And all kinds of prisons exist too, like relationship prisons,
Good point.
self-doubt prisons, mental health prisons.
Mhm.
So there's all kinds of prisons people can be in.
That's so true. Good point. Did anybody win?
Yes, Angela did.
Angela. Woo-woo.
Angela.
Okay, so Angela, You know the drill because you've watched before. You can come by and get it, or you can send us your
And that's what I was just
your
telling her.
address. If you do not live locally, we have 3 stores. You can come to any of the 3 stores. Just let us know. But we have the book at all 3 locations. And again, the book is Paganism for Prisoners, Connecting to the Magic Within. It's great that both of your books have the word magic, and then my magic of connection from the first book. And then, you know, Sasha Graham won, and she's a good friend of mine, and she won Magic of Tarot. The Magic of Tarot, she won that cover, so that magic, that magic was happening. So, was it Angela?
Angela, yes.
Okay, so Angela won your book, and thanks for listening, Angela, because she's a regular listener, right?
She is, yes.
So anything else tonight? Are we gonna? Do we have time for the 1, 2, 3? Or are we gonna not do that tonight, Matt? We're a little bit over, aren't we?
We have time.
Okay, so we're gonna do. Here's what we do. We do a little message for the week, and if Awyn, if you want that to just be, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do bibliomancy for my book. So I'm just going to pull an opening. That's going to be my reading. Roger, it looks like he's getting out his cards.
Well, Michelle, I was so good tonight. I did not cuss it. Did you notice, Matt? No cussing at all. We did not get blanked or beat.
Is that about to change?
It's going to change because I'm using Take a Magical Fucking Journey with this, my unicorn deck.
So some friends of ours, I think they're here. Nikki and Mary gave Roger a deck. What is it called again?
Take a Magical Fucking Journey with this 50-card profanity affirmation deck.
You know what it is? But they're the best positive affirmations. But I'm going to use my spirit of connection. My magic of. I'm combining my 2 books. The Spirits Unveiled, and we're going to have bibliomancy. We'll have you be number 1. Awyn will be number 2. Awyn, will be number 2. Matt, you'll sit this one out this week if that's okay.
That's fine.
And I'll be number 3. All it is, we're going to set the intention for the highest and best good, or however you set your intention. You set our intention. Those of you at home, y'all know how to play along. Pick number 1, number 2, number 3 to be your message for this week. And Roger's first, and we're gonna give it pretty quickly because we're over time. Go for it. Number 1.
This one, there's the card. And it says, be fucking decisive. Right or wrong, make a decision. The road of life is paved with flat squirrels that couldn't make a decision. So regardless if you're making a decision or not.
I said they were positive cards.
They are. It's telling you, whatever, pick a side and stick to it.
Okay, so I said I was going to use my book. This is the mock-up book, so the answer would be blank. Roger happened to do a mock-up book before my book came out from Llewellyn, and Awyn, he did the cover in a matte finish just like they did. Where's the camera? When it came out. It is the exact, and camera people love it because it's,
No, it looks great.
they told me when I was in D.C., I went with Llewellyn, I did a signing for the American Library Association or something a couple weeks ago, and I learned that my cover was a little controversial. It was like half the people liked it and half the people, and I was like, well, why'd you do it if only half the people? No, I'm kidding. But we love it because it's easy to film because it's not shiny.
well.
So my bibliomancy is going to come from your book. So I'm going to open the page from Paganism for Prisoners, Connecting to the Magic Within by Awyn Dawn, and all the number 2s. Didn't I say it was number 2?
Yeah,
Or is she number 2?
Number 2.
She's
I'm
number
number
2.
two.
You're 3.
You're 3.
I'm 3. So go for it, Awyn. Sorry, you're number 2.
That's okay. I was like, ooh, what's
My
she gonna
favorite
do?
number is number 2, so I try to hog the
All
2.
right. All right. So I read tarot intuitively, not by what the
That's
cards
fine.
are supposed to mean.
Go for it.
So this week, it's the 7 of Wands, which is choosing your battles.
Mhm.
There are lots of things out there to face day to day. You only have so much energy you can give. So this is about picking where that energy goes and understanding that wherever that energy goes is also going to reverberate back, because we know from scientific principles that energy likes energy with the same vibration. So choose very carefully what battles, and choose fewer battles, because not everything has to be a battle. Sometimes it can just be a flow.
Love that. And
Cool.
everybody knows 2 is always mine, so that makes sense, doesn't it? Roger?
And we
Pick
read
your
with
battle.
the same cards, looks like.
Yeah, y'all do, don't
Yeah.
you? All right, so I am reading out of. Now I'm reading as number threes. Whoever chose the number threes, and I opened to page 216. It's right before lesson 13, so it's at the end of lesson 12, and I opened right to the top two. So this is from Awyn's book for number threes. Write a statement about who you truly are. Try to keep it in a positive tense. Instead of writing, I'm not that bad of a person, write, I am a good person, for example. So that. And then the second one, I noticed too, ask yourself, who am I? What are my desires? How do I fulfill those desires? What do I need to do? So that's the message for the number threes this week, is for you to do. Write a statement about who you truly are. Keep it positive, and who am I? What are my desires? And how do I fulfill those desires? What do I need to do? And that's from Awyn's book that we went over that everybody's going to come get, Paganism
Yay.
for Prisoners. And we are so grateful. What'd you do?
I wrote my statement. I'm
What
a
is it?
badass motherfucker.
There
That's
we go.
a great statement.
It is a great statement. A lot of people can't say that, or they don't choose to say that, do they?
Nope.
And he believes it too, just so you know. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate that you weren't scared to death when I almost knocked you down and begged you to be on my show. And I know,
was so happy.
Yeah, and I know you've been on a lot of podcasts and have had so much success with this book, and I've received awards, and I am so happy for you. And I know your success will continue, and I believe so much of it is because of your kind heart and your willingness to give back. And we just want to thank you so much. And we want to thank everybody for listening this week. And thank you, Matt Stoker, for once again allowing us to go a little bit over. We always appreciate you so much. Yeah, he's like, that's all right. But anyway, everyone, thank you so much, and joining us again next week at the same time. We enjoy you, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.
Yep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, guys.
Thanks for listening to SoulWhat, a Soultopia production. If you're intrigued, searching, or looking to schedule a reading of your very own, visit us in sunny Dallas, Texas, or visit us online at facebook.com/Soultopia Holistic Boutique. And if you like what you heard, subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcasting platform to be the first to hear new episodes every Tuesday at 7:30 Central.